Greetings and welcome back to the channel. This video was prompted by one of my viewers, David Landon Cole, as one of the suggestions of things that I should talk about on said channel. And for me, it's a little bit of a hot take. A lot of people disagree with this, but I feel quite strongly, really, that I am right. Bear in mind, anything said here, obviously it depends on your own games and how you play things, but this is my general take where backgrounds for your characters applies for a lot of games, not just D&D. So my hot take is this, is you do not need a character background at all. Contrary to what a lot of these professional YouTubers will tell you, you don't need a character background, or at least not the way that they promote them. A character background for your character is meant to give you, the player, the idea of who your character is and where they have come from. But all too often, you see players producing backstories that rival War and Peace. I've had that myself, and it's quite frustrating. The reason I say this, and this all depends on the sort of campaign that you tend to play in or you tend to run. If you are a sandbox group, so the DM sets you off in the local tavern and then it's up to you where you go and they build up and play around it, what the players do, this is not all that useful. If they play episodic, so the idea of you play an adventure, then you play another adventure that might not even be in the same location. It might even be a different part of the world. There's very minimal continuity. Then this is kind of a bit of both. But if you play D&D in what I call the linear campaign, basically how adventure paths work, where you have a starting point and then it is plotted out in advance, often with the published like Paizo's adventure paths, a lot of it is plotted out, but you can modify it as you go, and even the player's actions can shift things slightly and the DM can react. If you play that sort of campaign, and probably about half of episodic ones, you do not need this sort of massive backstory. I'll give you an example. In my current Sunday night campaign, I'm running 2 campaigns in my homebrew at the moment, one every other Sunday and one every Tuesday. The Sunday night game is based Ghost of Saltmarsh. They've just hit 9th. They've got 1 scenario left from that book to play. Then they're doing some stuff relevant to a character background, to be fair. Then it will start to go planar, and then it will deal with the big bad that I have placed at the end of it, in this case Orcus, Demon Prince of the Undead. The primary point of the campaign, it is based around the town of Saltmarsh, with a few trips to the hold of the Pirate Princes, a region known as Darkmoor, which is this sort of like unpleasant subterranean realm. Think Zorn from Arcane, but slightly worse if you've watched that show. And then off to the plains. And I have a player. He is still relatively new to the hobby, so I don't hold this against him. He is playing a Kitsune wizard from Shizuoka, which is my sort of like Asian-inspired continent off to the west, across the ocean. And he's written me this grand background where his character's family has been slaughtered by a rival warlord who has now taken over their province, and she's had to flee to the main continent of Hyberia to try and hide from them. And he keeps sort of pressuring to get this part of the campaign. And I have had to explain early on, and a couple of times since, that this campaign has nothing to do with Shizuoka. This has nothing to do with your homeland across the sea. It's going to be extremely difficult to fit this in. At best, and I have said this, we have a session, maybe 2, where I will do an adventure where that backstory catches up with the character. But at no point, due to the way the campaign is sort of noted out and these pinpoints, are we going over there. And this is the problem with certain character backgrounds, not all of them, but that's one sort of, I will say, slightly extreme example. A character background should not incorporate something like that the player then expects to be dragged into the campaign. A character background should be a representation of who the character is. Yes, list your family and stuff, but you don't need to be edgelords. You don't need to have half of them killed off and you're on a vengeance gig to find who did it and hunt them down. It gives you an idea of who your character is, how they might, from their past experiences, react in a sort of given circumstance. It's there to give you the concept of your character and for the DM to go, okay, so I know who this is. Now, if there are little things that you can plug in, that's great. In the Tuesday night game, I simply said to everybody that they start arriving at the beginning of the session in a small logging town in the middle of nowhere called Thorn Hollow. They have arrived by airship from the city of Bardsgate. How do they know one another, and why have they boarded an airship to the middle of nowhere? And they had to sort of put this together. And they have differing character backgrounds. But none of it is specific. One player simply had that her character was looking for a friend who disappeared, and she'd heard that he'd boarded an airship and come out this way himself. So she's come looking for him. Another one was like a guard, and the people he was escorting were attacked by bandits and killed. And these bandits had this strange tattoo on their arms. And he's cast aside his job in this town guard to hunt down these people who basically did this. So he can kind of get his vengeance on them and set himself right. And that's great because it's minor. I can fit that in at some point. I can easily have these bandits turn up or be part of the larger plot later on. Another character, basically the wizard. His backstory is that he was part of a wizard academy in the capital of Byatis. He was a professor teaching transmutation. He tried to write a thesis, a book, on the use of fungus in spell components. Unwittingly titled it something like the study of magic mushrooms, and the faculty laughed him out of his job. And he's off trying to sort of find a new goal and a new path that his character might find. And that's it. There's nothing, no grand sweeping, my family's been murdered by a black dragon and its cohorts. None of, the evil villains done this. They're simple backstories that explain who the character is and done. And any little things like, the bandits can be dropped in at some point, even if it's just an encounter somewhere, the player can have that. You don't need these deep, how's the right way to put it? These thick backstories that introduce villains and things that may or may not fit into the campaign. The best way to do this is to just speak to the DM first and see whether it's appropriate. Have this idea, and if they go, yeah, great, then use it. If they go, no, because we're not really going to that part of the world, or we're not doing this or the other, come up with something else that's more fitting to the nature of the campaign. The DM doesn't have to tell you exactly what's going to happen, but they can tell you that something may or may not work within the framework that they have planned. The DM is under no forced means to accept your character background and run with it. Because quite often you'll end up with the 4 or 5 people at the table with completely conflicting and unusual backgrounds that don't really gel to the campaign. And you don't want that. In fact, the best backstory that I've ever read was a long time ago. This is back when I first started with role-playing games, back in high school, in my teens, in the late 80s, which was, and this was in a book that I was reading at the time about Dungeons and Dragons. And this particular character was, they were playing a fighter, and their backstory simply was that the evil Lord Dundrell, whatever his name was, had seized the local village under under his iron grip. He's enslaved the families and taken their farms, and evil villain, slavery, and all this sort of stuff. And the character had fled, grabbing his father's sword, and he was off to become an adventurer to get enough money to basically buy it all back and put the Frighteners on this lord. And that was it. That was their goal. This was their backstory. It's something that could quite happen within the first 5 or 6 levels, depending on the amount of money that they get. But it's something that can easily be fitted into the campaign. And from that point on, the player can carry on with the story that is being told. That's my thoughts on character backstories. No deep, thick, chunky tome. And I've had a player do that to me before. Big, thick, chunky backstory, and it doesn't work. You just need something that lets you as the player know who your character is, where they come from, and give you an idea of how to react in certain given circumstances that may or may not have happened to them before the campaign starts. That's my thoughts. I would like to hear yours down below in the comments. Let me know whether you agree or disagree. Just keep it polite if you disagree. Tell me how you do it, how your group does it. And thank you for watching. Hit the thumbs up button, hit the subscribe button, and let's start a conversation down in the comments. Until next time, take care everyone. Good gaming.